Horror in cinema.
Yeah.
Hors d'oeuvres in cinema. Niles, without question in my mind, number one on any list of horror films. But that's me. Other people have, I was raised Catholic, so I'm going to have some problems other people aren't going to have. Exorcist is top, so I looked at some lists today online. Exorcist was 1 or 2 on a lot of lists.
Yeah.
Wired magazine put out a list today of the top 25. Guess what they left off? And they were brutalized for it in the commentary section. The Shining.
I was going to guess.
Leave it off?
The big 3 are Rosemary's Baby, Exorcist, and Shining.
Exactly. List after list after list. That's what came through. Now, there are a lot of young guys out there listening right now who think you're full of beans and I'm full of beans.
I am full of beans.
And the reason is we're not listing any films that came out in the last 10 years. And there have been changes in what's considered scary during our lifetime, and maybe what you and I, and you're 12, so I don't know what the hell your problem is.
Yeah.
Maybe you and
13.
I just are stuck in an old, archaic world of horror, and we don't understand what wonders there are when you grab a video camera and create the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity or whether you, what else? Give me something else that someone could argue right now who's 22 years old tops anything you and I have mentioned.
The Human Centipede.
Was that any good?
It was all right, I thought.
I'll tell you one of the scariest scenes I've seen, and I never even saw the movie, but I saw it on YouTube.
What?
That, oh, God, it was so creepy that it's just right now I'm having trouble even talking about it because it's flashing in my mind. Malcolm McDowell. You know what I'm talking about here?
Clockwork Orange?
No, Clockwork Orange was not scary to me. It was funny. It was a hoot. No, he goes into that room. They're experimenting on people at this hospital, and he doesn't know what's going on, and he escapes at one point and gets out of his not hotel room, his hospital room, goes across the hall into an adjacent hospital room, finds a guy in bed, wonders what experiment they're doing on him, asks him, the guy can't talk. He keeps asking him, the guy's sweating, but he can't talk. He pulls the sheets away, and from the neck down, the guy's a sheep. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't. But does he fall in love with the sheep?
You haven't seen that?
No, I haven't.
Niles, I have never brought up anything having to do with film that you didn't already know about, and we've been doing this since May.
You know what? I am like you in the sense that I get kind of anxious about horror films.
Oh, that scene. You can see it on YouTube. Just put in Malcolm McDowell and the sheep. Malcolm McDowell and the sheep.
A love story?
What are you going to tell me about? Well, I'm going to get out the Niles Files. I read the Niles Files. Niles writes at, see if I can get this. Watch this. The NilesFilmFiles.blogspot.com. Yes, except for the. Get rid of the. Okay. Interesting. That's what they said in Facebook. NilesFilmFiles.blogspot.com. Go to it right now, bring your daddy and your mom, and you'll read about movies and you'll have some fun, and when you're done, come back to us, we'll talk some film, son. Come on, NilesFilmFiles.blogspot.com. That's the only way they remember it. If you don't put it in a sing-songy deal, no matter how obnoxious it is, I mean, rattle, rattle, thunder, cradle, boom, 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 why do I remember that? Don't worry, call the car X-Man. Here we go, ready?
Or Midway Ford. Yeah.
I don't like that Roseville Midway Ford, because at Midway Ford it would be in the Midway, and then there's a lady, I think there used to be a Midway Ford song, and then instead of redoing the song, they just said to a lady, can you just scream right before they say Midway Roseville? So right before they say Midway Ford, it's the talk of the town, you hear this lady going, Roseville! She squeezes in, no, redo the song. Here we go. As films have gotten more violent and intense, so too have we become more tolerant to their assaults. That's the first theme I want to address, the notion of constantly raising the bar up in the ante. I want to put in perspective the range you want to look at, which is an incredible range. The classic horror monsters of the 30s, Val Lewton, Psychological Mazes in the 40s, the B-movie Monsters, Invaders of the 50s, Psycho, and the appearance of the human monster in the 60s, the religious skepticism and apocalyptic anxiety of Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, The Omen, the zombies of George Romero, the slasher nuclear families of Tobe Hooper, Wes Craven, Larry Cohen, the venereal bio-horror of David Cronenberg, the nihilistic reflexivity of Brian De Palma, the puzzling ambiguities of The Shining, the reactionary sexual puritanism of Halloween, the gothic nostalgia of Prestige, 1990s Halloween horror, the deranged serial killers of Manhunter, The Silence of the Lambs, and Seven, the torture porn of Saw and Hostel, the handheld contrivances of the Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity. Horror is about the primal base of our being bursting through the civilized veneer of structure and system, where assuredness and comfort are negated. And they certainly were in all of those. When you look back over this vast expanse of horror in cinema, do you see a golden era the same way I can talk to you about film and you can start to get almost weepy thinking about the stretch from 1960 to 1970? I'm sorry, 1965 to 1979?
Well, that's complicated because there probably are several golden eras in horror because there's so many different avenues that we could explore. Now, maybe the 1970s, again, that period that I always bring up, is considered to be its own kind of golden age for horror. If movies like Easy Rider, The Conversation, and Nashville represented the national consciousness in the 1970s, it could be argued that movies like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Last House on the Left, It's Alive, those underground movies, or Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, represented the national unconscious, because a lot of that was politically motivated, and it's not overt with its meaning, but it mirrors the energy of that time period, the kind of frenzy and uncertainty. Otherwise, when we think about tolerance, we go back to the 1930s. That's, of course, when figures like Dracula and Frankenstein became iconographic in our popular consciousness. There's actually a movie theater in the Twin Cities, the Astor Cinema, which is briefly referenced to in the Coen Brothers film, A Serious Man. And in 1938, they played Dracula and Frankenstein as part of a double feature. And if you were a woman and you could sit through both of those movies, you would get $25 as a prize. That's how hard it was for people to sit through those two films, which, if we look at them today...
That amazes me, because I was going to argue, if you didn't let me have The Exorcist as the scariest film, I was going to argue, and you would have been able to just trump me with what you just said. I would have argued, well, tell me another horror film that had people leaving in droves like The Exorcist. That is the story of The Exorcist. In 1973?
1973, yeah.
When that came to town all over the country... sometimes as many as half the people who showed couldn't take it and left.
People had seizures.
And I was going to argue, give me another film like that. And you're telling me back then women couldn't get through those, huh?
We have a whole history of people not being able to get through those kinds of movies.
I grew up in St. Paul. I played a little intramural ball and stopped at a bar every now and then.
Well, now we have a problem because we're basically desensitized, and how do we up the ante? And nowadays, in our YouTube culture, where we're in sort of this postmodern arena of complete irony.
We can't keep doing the postmodern, by the way. What are we going to be saying in the 3000s? It's really postmodern now. I mean, why did we ever invent the term? We were bound to be screwed by it.
We're at about our 30th or 31st post, I think, at this stage, and it's impossible to scare people anymore. Or it isn't. I went to the Willow Creek Cinema. They were showing The Exorcist for free last weekend. They do these midnight retros every weekend, and they were showing it for free. And I saw it with an audience, and the people behind me, these kids behind me, were just snarkily commenting on everything happening. They were hiding behind their cynical movie knowledge references in order to stave off any kind of engagement with the movie, and so you couldn't be scared by it. I went back and watched it alone, and the film is still effective completely. But
yeah, that's an old trick. I remember doing that as a kid with my brothers, trying to crack wise to keep the movie from penetrating.
Well, the guy who just called you was, I think, at the end of last hour was rationalizing how you deal with, say, Freddy Krueger or Chucky, for example. And of course, Chucky's a little doll; you just step on him, or Freddy Krueger, you just clip his fingernails. But this horror movies, the reason they work is because they match our dreams. That's what they are geared towards accomplishing that dream frenzy. And in dreams, we're helpless to the supernatural, to the fantastic, to what Freud calls the uncanny. And so nowadays, if we could just be cynical about it and not fall into that dream, we're safe, basically.
How many people do you think there are like me who, I mean, what percentage of the population doesn't want to see a horror film? Because there's just the notion of paying good money to just be scared to death.
The same thing with roller coasters, though. It's the same deal.
I don't think so, and here's why. I don't think so, and here's why. The thrill with a roller coaster can be much like the thrill of riding a motorcycle fast in the country, and you can feel great joy. I don't think in the horror of The Exorcist a soul felt joy.
No, but we love fear. We love fear, and
there's a difference between positive thrill and the joy associated with it, and what the thrill of being scared and the agony of it.
Perhaps it's the same kind of drive that leads us to inquire about, say, Mayan prophecy, for example, or why are we so interested in the occult? Because we're precocious. We're kind of a morbid species too, and we like to. I mean, if you want the short answer as to why we see horror films, I think the short answer that probably require a lot of elaboration is sex and death. Anticipation, repression, and all these other kinds of concepts. But
well, how about this? And this is just my amateur stab at it. All that stuff in the horror films is in us.
Yeah.
It's in us.
Yeah.
You know, the greatest atrocity on planet Earth, each of us is capable of that. And but fortunately, the better angels of our nature went out, and we don't let those demons out to play. Most of us, some do, but you can let them out. You can live vicariously through these fictional images that are letting them out, and sort of feel a little bit about a little bit of that world, and then go back to yours and exercise them. Give them a little.
I think you
room
got it.
To play.
I think you got it right there. I mean, that's what horror movies do, and you're describing what dreams do also. Because when we do what happens when we dream is that our mind we're taking the pressures that we have to compartmentalize throughout the day and venting them in a sense, so our psychology could be at rest. And horror films, I think, do the same thing.
But I think for me, so if I don't want to let those things out there, where am I letting them out?
Well, I don't differentiate my feelings towards horror films to say, I mean, you saw No Country for Old Men, for example. And that movie, to me, is just as frightening. The Javier Bardem, Anton Chigurh character, who does have almost a supernatural quality.
Yeah.
It's just as frightening as anything in a horror film.
And I also, I didn't have a problem with Jaws.
Jaws, I think, is a great horror film. And the thing about
I don't have a problem with Hitchcock, so I guess I'm talking about something else here.
Maybe you're thinking about slasher.
I'm for sure thinking about slasher. Yeah. And also The Exorcist actually was just was too much. And again, because you can put that in that category of just gore. There was too much gore.
But it's the gory parts of The Exorcist that I think aren't its stronger points. It's more of the subliminal stuff, the stuff that gets under your skin, the stuff that, like, when Linda Blair's head turns around, that to me is not scary.
No.
The monstrous contortions are not scary. However, the soundtrack, the contorted voice, which is almost peripheral.
Which you do. Will you do that again?
What this?
Oh, God, I got the lights off in here, and I want to turn them back on, because I just got the...
I'm going to suck out your intestines and chew them while you're still alive.
It was weird when you up until you did the thing with the made the sound of the squirrel there. It was terrifying, and then all of a sudden you were a Disney character. Okay, where were we? We got to take a break. We'll be back. These are the Niles Film Files, ladies and gentlemen. Niles Schwartz is here, as he is every Thursday, most Thursdays, unless there's a problem like
Good
a big
evening.
old. Don't do that anymore. Will you just?
NHL is going to die.
We'll be back.